NPR actually had a piece about 4 or 5 months ago that talked about no matter what you tell people about food. So you could say that conventional food is absolutely safe to eat. You could say that organic food is absolutely safe to eat. And it doesn't matter what type of person you're talking to, there is such a degree of skepticism with science and how science is utilized in society that they won't believe you, no matter what you tell them. Like, the general public is very skeptical of science.
Welcome to the Better Each Day podcast radio show with Bruce Hilliard. Today and every day, reaching out for innovative ideas in every way. Today's show is brought to you by your future. It comes with a lifetime guarantee.
Have you ever wondered what the term organic really means and why you're asked to pay a premium for it? Today's guest is Dr. Samantha Mosier. She's an assistant professor of political science at Missouri State University, where she teaches courses on American government, public policy and administration, and environmental policy. One of her focuses is on sustainable agriculture and policy. Samantha is the author of Creating Organic Standards in the U.S. States. And this was our conversation on August 7th, 2017. And hello everyone. Today I'd like to welcome Samantha Mosier. She will be talking to us a little bit about organic agriculture. My question was, right off the bat, I'm an average consumer. I walk into a grocery store or a supermarket, not necessarily a farmer's market, and I see the labels and prices on organic products. What does that mean and how does it get there? How does it earn the title organic?
So the term organic is actually regulated by the United States Department of Agriculture's National Organic Program. This program was established through a 1990 federal law and fully went into effect in 2002. It's one of the few terms that is actually regulated by the federal government in terms of advertising usage and how it appears on the packaging of your food products. So in terms of what it actually means, you have to essentially understand all the rules and regulations behind how that term is actually applied during the agricultural process in terms of production, manufacturing, and distribution. So it's a very complicated concept that to most would be very overwhelming to understand the depth for what actually goes into that particular meaning.
I know it was for me, and it looked to me that it started at a state level and then it progressed to federal. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so the term organic actually gained ground in the 1970s. So we take it way before I was even born. In the 1970s, you have this counterculture movement or this alternative movement to what we know today as conventional agriculture. So conventional agriculture, you can think of it as monocropping, large-scale, industrial in nature. And we see industrial agriculture really come out of the mid-20th century in an attempt to increase agricultural yields. So improve efficiency and yield so we can feed a growing population. So the answer was to infuse technology, and particularly advanced technologies, into our agricultural production system. Some people did not buy into these innovations, and so they were more into what we would know as the alternative, sustainable, natural, or organic type of farming and food production system. So they were kind of at this fringe in the 1970s. And so you start seeing a wide swath of individuals, everything from what we would know as the hippie counterculture to health food, hedonics, people that are very enthusiastic about eating healthy, and they were moving towards a natural health food market. But then you see these larger companies in the 1970s start to advertise their food as being all natural. Some of these individuals took great offense to this particular application of the term natural, so to make themselves different in terms of the products that they were selling, they started saying, well, we're going to call our goods organic. So it started out really on the West Coast and up in the Northeast, and these individuals started advocating for policies and what we would know as third-party certifiers to come in and essentially make those claims valid that they are producing organic agriculture to be produced and sold to consumers. So it is a 1970s concept. It did become regulated in the states first, and it picked up steam particularly in the late 1980s, and then by 1990 the federal government finally got involved.
So one of the first states that I saw was Oregon.
Yes, Oregon did it through administrative rules in 1973 is when those were particularly published. New York did a legislative bill in 1976, but they didn't do much in terms of actually creating rules and regulations for the market. The big ones came in the late 1970s, and particularly California. California is a leading agricultural producer, and this particular state also produces a large amount of our specialty crops, so nuts, berries, fruits and vegetables. And these were the market areas where we actually saw organic food grow the most initially. And then later on, it would move into things like dairy production, beef, poultry, pork, things of that particular nature.
So how does it apply to foreign countries then?
So in terms of standards, you have to remember organic means something very specific when we talk about it from a regulatory standpoint with the government. So the USDA National Organic Program has developed today interoperability agreements or exchange equivalency agreements with other international organizations that have developed organic standards as well. So at the international level, there was a growing interest in the 1970s and 1980s as well, and they've tried to reconcile the differences between standards and agreements among countries for how products are certified. So there are foreign producers that can be certified by individuals in the National Organic Program, which I would say, if you're unfamiliar with the National Organic Program, it would technically be defined as a co-regulatory structure in which the federal government sets the standards for what it means to be organic, and then it relies on a host of third-party, nonprofit, and state agencies to go out and actually do the certification. So each one of these third-party certifiers will vary in the scope in terms of what they're actually certifying and where they will certify. So we do have producers over in Asia and other countries that are certified organic by certifiers in the National Organic Program here in the U.S.
I heard a quote, and I'm paraphrasing like crazy, from a spokesman of a company that's known for processed foods, and the quote was that the population is growing so quickly, there's no way to supply food for...
Exact opposite. And so, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not able to really accurately predict yields, but both of these concepts of this industrial conventional agriculture versus this more sustainable system, both of them are really trying to answer the exact same question on how do we actually feed a growing population. For those that are in that alternative sustainable form, there are some individuals crying that all of these applications of biotechnology, patented seeds, things that are supposed to actually increase our crop yields are not doing what they originally were intended to do. So not to get into the nitty-gritty details, but some of these individuals are stating that I'm no longer buying patented seeds because the type of pesticide resistance that's built into it is not actually coming to fruition. It's damaging my land, so I can't actually get the yields that are promised. And so they're actually changing back over to non-patented seeds, things that we would actually classify more in the sustainable category of agriculture. The growing population is a very large concern for a number of reasons, and when it comes to food access and production, there is that question in terms of yields, but there's also the question of access. So I live here in Missouri. In terms of local foods, we don't have a local food hub where I'm currently at. So I live in the Springfield metro area. I think the closest actual food hub that is well established is up in Kansas City. And so in terms of my access to local, healthy food, sustainable food system, if we were to be cut off from the rest of the world, we couldn't do that here, just simply because we import quite a food from far away areas, much, much further away than where we're currently at, and that's an unsustainable system. But if you look at some place like California, for example, the access to healthy, fresh vegetables, fruits, nuts, basically a wide diet variety, that's much more easily sustainable there, and your access is easier there, although the cost may be prohibitive when you start considering things like cost of living adjustments and things of that nature.
I think cost is a big concern for the consumer when they go into the store and they see all these labels, all these prices. And of course, the organic things don't have the labels and wrappers that look like a Brady Bunch designed them or something. What is the cost? Why? The question I guess I'm getting to is, what is the reason for the extra cost? Is it regulatory things? Is it taxes? Is it certifications?
So the organic program actually has a fee associated with becoming certified. It is also very, I think the best way to put this, it's very, very time consuming to become certified organic. So for some, the cost is very prohibitive, particularly if you're a small scale farmer. The cost of actually becoming certified, keeping up with the paperwork, essentially that bureaucratic red tape that some people refer to, that can be very cost prohibitive. And if you're not a large scale farmer, these particular costs and paper trails can become consuming. On top of that, organic to some extent is a little bit more labor intensive compared to some of these other conventional applications, and that you don't easily have type of remedies available to correct the problem as you would in organic. So sometimes, so take dairy for instance, some of the applications that could be used in conventional dairy production, so you don't have those same restrictions as organic, you can't necessarily do that in organic production. So it becomes more time consuming and it requires more work really to have that organic dairy product as opposed to a conventional product. I mean, you're just looking at a value-added product, and anytime you have value added to that, it makes it more expensive.
So there are actually third-party auditors, I believe, that come out and check on the to see if everyone's following procedure.
So that's what I was talking about earlier.
Yes.
So the design of the program at the national level is not where we have the National Organic Program and you had to have a set of administrative officers that come out and check on the farms. It's not the way it works. The National Organic Program has a standards board. So the National Organic Standards Board creates a list of prohibited and accepted list of substances and practices for what makes organic organic. So they come up with this list of things you can and cannot do, these substances you can and cannot use, and that is what organic means when you see the USDA organic seal. So you have this board that comes up with it, and it's supposed to be democratically representative of producers, consumers, environmental groups, scientists, and a host of individuals. So these individuals are on this board, and they come up with this list. The way this law is implemented is that you then have those nonprofit, private, or state organizations that come out and do the certification. So if you live in the state of Georgia, for example, you have a group from either South Carolina or the state of Georgia that can come in and will certify your farm or your processing facility as organic. And then these certifiers will go and tell the National Organic Program, yes, they pass, they are certified organic, they now can use the USDA seal. Now, there are a few exceptions to that particular rule, namely if you are a small-scale farmer, and I think your sales are somewhere around less than, don't quote me on this, but $5,000, so small-scale sales, then you are able to not go through the certification process, but can sell your goods as organic.
5,000 was the figure that I saw. That sounds like it'd be extremely hard to police. How do you regulate that?
There's really no way you can. So, I mean, the number of farmers markets, depending on where you live, can be, you can only have one, you may have none. You could have 4 or 5 farmers markets within a radius. And sometimes these farmers may not actually understand what organic is and the regulations that are behind that term. And so sometimes they may be selling an item that is not certified organic as organic. So farmers markets, there is a bigger risk if you are wanting to actually adhere to the USDA standards. There may be more of a risk that you are buying something that is not organic according to federal law. But if you go into a grocery store and you see something that says USDA organic, that little green seal, that has went through the certification process.
That's sort of counterintuitive to me. I would think if I'm going to a farmer's market, I'm going to get something that, some extremely naturalist person is going to be growing, and it's not going to be subject to pesticides and a lot of things that I would think that the big guys would have.
Well, that's a large misconception. So I guess with organic in general, yes, there are applications of pesticides. It just depends on what type of pesticides you're talking about. And that's been a very large debate. So that's a big misconception that organic is free of pesticide applications. They are there. It's just they prohibit a certain type of pesticides from being used. And that sometimes makes people a little worried. They're like, I didn't realize I was buying something that actually had that on there. So
it does. I know it does me, and you just never know what to believe, what you read, what you hear. And if what we eat and breathe is fundamental to everything else we do, what do you think is the future of this?
I'm not actually sure. So agriculture is intertwined with our economic activity to no other extent. So the U.S. trade balance, if you get into economic considerations and discussions, our trade balance with other countries is deeply impacted by our agricultural productivity. And a lot of that is tied to conventional agriculture, so our grain crops and things of that nature. But when we're looking in terms of how we can eat healthy and holistically and try to keep the body in shape and all these good things, the best bet is to simply be aware of what you're consuming. So in terms of if you are going to buy organic, there are some products that they suggest you buy if you're really trying to avoid some of those chemical applications that are on conventional crops. So they sometimes refer to this as the dirty dozen items you should buy organic. So things like strawberries come up on that list quite a bit. So if you can't really afford to constantly buy everything organic, maybe there are just a few items you can focus on. But in terms of other ways we can move to the future, learn how to grow your own crops. I mean, that sounds, for some people, this may be limited in terms of where they live, but even where I live, I don't have permission or the ability really to grow crops, but I have a container garden. So I grow peppers and okra, things I enjoy eating, in these little containers on my front porch. If you're interested in terms of environmental impacts, you can become a locavore. So only buy things within a certain square mile or only things that come from your home state. There are a number of states that are moving to, I guess, like state pride or state proud programs. So products and items that are only produced in your state, you could focus on only buying those. You could also minimize your consumption of meat, which also has a negative impact on the environment, particularly beef production is particularly harmful. So moving to the future, there's not really a clear-cut answer in terms of how we're to eat sustainably and healthily, is because there's a large stress on the system already, because we've talked about population, and figuring out how we can improve access and yields at the same time.
That's very interesting. I plan on eating healthy food and staying alive for a long time so I can see how this develops. Should be interesting.
It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next 20 to 30 years. Because there are some suggestions that we are moving to more of a regional hub of economic activity. So we went through that period of globalization, and now we're seeing on a political scale a lot of nationalistic and protectionist measures, and so that may be moving our economy and therefore our agricultural systems more into a local production or regional-based economic system. And if that happens, then we will see a return to more seasonal fruits and vegetables, things of that nature, simply because it's cost prohibitive to bring items in, either from overseas or from one side of the country to the other.
Well, I'm up in Washington, and our we grow apples. Well, I think that's what we're famous for. But the growing season's fairly limited to something like tomatoes, and then there's a whole myriad of other vegetable fruit products that we use. But yeah, I wonder, I think we'll always import up here.
And it's kind of strange that so Washington and in general, what we would used to consider these areas that have short growing seasons. So just think of like North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Michigan. These areas used to have very short growing seasons. But we know with climate change and a lot of these environmental changes going on that those areas are actually going to see longer growing seasons in the future, and it's going to get hotter. What doesn't help any of this is that you're going to have more unpredictable climate patterns, so more extreme weather events that may impact that. But right now, where Kansas is sitting, Missouri is sitting, these areas that have these large-scale agricultural productivity centers have ideal conditions right now for growing particular crops, but that belt is going to move up further north as our globe continues to get warmer. So same way areas like Florida and Southern California, which right now do pretty well in like things like citrus production, those belts of production are going to grow north as it gets hotter. And it's just simply because it's more difficult to actually grow in those areas. Wow. So agricultural production areas are going to shift as the climate begins to change.
Then you have to wonder what the time frame would be on that. You're very young, so you're going to see more of that than I'm going to.
There are some models, and I was talking to somebody else about this, but they said that on the East Coast at least, if you're wanting weather that is like the North Carolina, South Carolina area right now, you need to move to Michigan. Because Michigan is supposedly going to be the safe haven that won't necessarily be impacted by coastal flooding. It's going to have decent weather both in the summer and the winter, so you're going to see all 4 seasons. And so that North Carolina, South Carolina parallel, if you like that weather, by 2050 you actually need to move to like the Michigan area, that parallel, because it's going to have decent weather and perfect growing conditions compared to other areas.
This recording will be around then. That'll be interesting to see what happens. They'll look back on this and say, wow, either spot on or what the heck were they talking about? So,
well, I would say I didn't do that study. I just read about it, but it will be interesting.
Good to point that out. Yeah, I'm careful about doing that myself. That's why I'm letting you do all the talking, as a matter of fact.
That's scary.
Yeah. Well, I'm running out of time. I want to thank you so much for speaking your words of wisdom to us. I hope to speak with you in the future, or maybe we'll do a recap on this conversation and see what's going on. So, Samantha, Thank you so much, and you have a great day.
Thanks.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Support for Better Each Day comes from BruceHilliardHomes.com. For a better day in buying or selling a home, search BruceHilliardHomes.com or visit our website Better Each Day for more information. And while you're there, subscribe to the show. It's free. That's BruceHilliardHomes.com, Windermere Real Estate, and make it better each day.
Radio show with Bruce Hilliard. We'll be back with a new horizon, but until then, honor the future. It comes with a lifetime guarantee.
We're all just trying to make the next day a bit better.